Cognitive behavior therapy has been around since the middle 1960s. That's really when the birth of CBT was. When we first came online, we addressed very specific problems. So the very first behavioral treatment was the treatment for a simple phobia. And that was Dr. Wolpe's famous treatment that became known as systematic desensitization, and it got very high success rates. But it was simple, it was simplistic, and it was very contained. And you hardly see anybody that has a very specific, simple problem. So what happened over the 70s is that then, we started with it as behavior therapists. Then in the 70s, cognitive therapy got integrated into behavior therapy. So I don't know if you know that history, but when Aaron Beck first wrote his book in 1976, he actually had a whole paragraph putting down behavior therapy. He didn't like it. By 1979, he joined the Association of Behavior Therapists because he felt that there was so much congruence and that this was the right home for him.
Right.
And he became well, we say that what was once an oxymoron, cognitive and behavioral, became two words that are now inextricably joined. But you might want to know that for the first time in 1976 or so, when a guy named Donald Meichenbaum first used the term cognitive in a presentation, half the audience walked out in protest because they basically said that cognition was not something that was a subject of study for the scientific study of human behavior because it was an unobservable. And as an unobservable, it wasn't good data. If you went to our convention today, you would see that virtually 100% of the papers are cognitive behavioral treatments. So there's no such thing as being a behavior therapist without being a cognitive therapist, and there's no such thing as being a cognitive therapist without being a behavior therapist. They are one therapy today. In the 70s, Beck started to study the effectiveness of cognitive therapy on depression. And in fact, by 79, we really had established a hallmark, which is that CBT for unipolar depression was shown to be as effective as medication treatment. And that was brilliant, repeated again in the early 80s. And then through the 80s, we started applying CBT to the full range of anxiety and mood disorders. But nobody was touching personality disorders yet. So not until around the end of the 80s, and probably the name Jeff Young would be the first name to be associated with this, and his form of therapy, cognitive behavior therapy, was called schema therapy. And schema therapy was the first therapy that was meant to address personality disorders.